feel like I should feel like I should feel like I should feel like I should go. Go. Feel like I should go. Feel like I should feel like I should feel like I should feel like I should go. Feel like I should go. Feel like I should feel like I should feel like I should feel like I should.
GETCRACK. Wake up, motherfucker.
Yo. Sunday, January 26th, 2025. Happy Lunar New Year's to you. All right. So I was going to do something, I guess, on the weekend that I was thinking about. So today we're going to do some dry, boring economics because I got inspired by one of the clips I was playing. That dude was all talking about the Phillips curve and this and that. Hey, we got something over the weekend. They keep pumping that China deep seek. Yeah, deep seek. Weird name, but all right. Here you go. It's called Deep Seek. It looks like it's turning out to be this generation's version of Sputnik or something, but with AI. And I was also inspired by HB's little monologue and soliloquies that he was doing when he first came back. That 3-hour part, the section where he's just like going back and forth with EAE. Now, okay, is the moon real? Blah, 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 this and that. It doesn't matter. Necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, necessity is the mother of invention. So, with that being said, it doesn't matter. What happened, because if we want to go that route, we could say it was a psyop. And this AI stuff is also a psyop. It's being done to generate labor, right? It's being done to generate labor. Labor in the sense that people are now focused on trying to improve large language models and all this. Just like how the space race generated labor to do new forms of engineering, develop our semiconductor industry, computing, everything that we take for granted nowadays was developed all in that era. And rocketry, was also important in developing new material sciences. So we have a lot of new metals and plastics because of that effort. So whether it was real or not, it generated people, it focused people, right? It focused people's efforts in a direction. So EAE also complained that, well, money is the motive to do everything. Well, look, there's a lot of easier ways to make money than do engineering. Engineering is hard. Very few people want to do that type of work. You know, when I was an engineer, that shit was like, even the most basic stuff took a lot of effort. It wasn't something where anybody could just do. It takes a special person. And for someone to be motivated enough to work long hours just to invent something, you either have to be so creative, have no sense of like, okay, money to do something. That's what like HB was going for when he was alluding to Tesla. Like he just did it because he had visions to create things and he wanted to implement them. It wasn't a motive of money. So someone like that has to be motivated by different things, right? So to get the general populace to be motivated to do something hard requires a psyop, requires a focus. Today's focus is AI, all right? And how that relates to the stock market is because that will affect and shift how productivity is done. Now, we're going to have to look at wages, productivity, and unemployment. And all these things will affect how the Fed will move, how Trump will move, monetary and fiscal policies. And in the end, that will affect where your stocks are moving. So, okay, so there's a lot of drama in the weekend. So maybe I shouldn't have sold my shorts in the semiconductor sector because I was shorting that thing and it looks like I didn't think this thing was a big deal, the DeepSeek crap. But now over the weekend, it's like all these news articles and all this discussion on Twitter. DeepSeek, NVIDIA is going to crash, this and that. Oh, man. See, everything always happens on the weekend, doesn't it? There's no new news. They're just hyping up something. They want the market to crash on Monday. I'm not sure if it's going to happen or not, but let's see. Maybe we'll get some new trades Monday morning. So in preparation for Jerome Powell to speak on Wednesday. All right. So let's get to the articles. Put some background music here. And we'll go back over something I talked about when I first came on John Galt's channel, the dollar milkshake theory. And you'll understand why, the U.S. dominates the world with the currency that we have. Okay? That's very important for you to understand. All right, let's do some. That up. And then go to our first article. We'll start with the DeepSeek stuff. And we'll move on from there. And when we talk about liquidity, you have to go back to my previous video some weeks ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, and I'll put the link down and you can go over that one. And then you'll come back here and re-watch this one and you'll understand. Okay, here we are. Let me put this up. All right, that's pretty good website. MIT Technology Review, very heavy on the technology, less on the policies and all that. So this is going to be tech heavy. How a top Chinese AI model overcame US sanctions with a new reasoning model that matches the performance of ChatGPT 01. DeepSeek managed to turn restrictions into innovation. Yes, necessity is the mother of all invention. And I feel like when you restrict someone, yes, they'll be more creative. When you allow people to do whatever they want with little restrictions, they'll get less creative. Okay, so Kawai Chen, January 24th, 2025. The AI community is abuzz over DeepSeek R1, a new open source reasoning model. The model was developed by the Chinese AI startup DeepSeek, which claims that R1 matches or even surpasses OpenAI's ChatGPT 01 on multiple key benchmarks, but operates at a fraction of the cost. This could be a truly equalizing breakthrough that is great for researchers and developers with limited resources, especially those from the global south, says Hangchang Chao, an assistant professor in information systems at Emory University. DeepSeek's success is even more remarkable given the constraints facing Chinese AI companies in the form of increasing U.S. export controls on cutting-edge chips, i.e. NVIDIA. But early evidence shows that these measures are not working as intended. Rather than weakening China's AI capabilities, the sanctions appear to be driving startups like DeepSeek to innovate in ways that prioritize efficiency, resource pooling, pooling, and collaboration. To create R1, DeepSeek had to rework its trading process to reduce the strain on its GPUs, graphics processing units. A variety released by NVIDIA for the Chinese market that have their performance capped at half the speed of its top products, according to Zihan Wang, a former DeepSeek employee and current PhD student in computer science at Northwestern University. Yes, there are a lot of graduate students from China, from Iran, in computer science and electrical engineering. Yes, when I was there, I was probably one of the last like fully American people in graduate school. The next generation was all Chinese Iranians. Okay, that's it. That's what it is. So all the latest stuff will come from people like these at the top graduate levels. And, you know, Americans at this point, you know, don't feel like it's worth it to go to graduate school because obviously if I go to school for how many more years to get a PhD degree, how much more money would I get? If it's about money, there are a lot of easier ways to get money nowadays. Plenty. Like me, stock market, right? That's why I'm teaching you right now. Like you see what I showed you on my portfolio, and I'm not even doing options, and I regularly get like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 a month, right? So why should I go work? That's not enough of a motive. You have to want to do something for society. Anyway, and the Chinese obviously are very, very patriotic, right? Very ethnocentric, right? So you can put that into your political and racial arguments right there. Anyhow, DeepSeek R1 has been praised by researchers for its ability to tackle complex reasoning tasks, particularly in mathematics and coding. The model employs a chain of thought approach similar to that used by ChatGPT o1, which lets it solve problems by processing queries step by step. Demetrius Papaliopoulos. Damn, that is a very interesting Greek name. I never encountered one that complex, but all right. Principal researcher at Microsoft's AI Frontiers Research Lab says what surprised him the most about R1 is its engineering simplicity. DeepSeek aimed for accurate answers rather than detailing every logical step, significantly reducing computing time while maintaining a high level of effectiveness. DeepSeek has also released 6 smaller versions of R1 that are small enough to run locally on laptops. Bing, bing, bing. So we have models that can run on cheaper hardware. Very important right there. It claims that one of them even outperforms OpenAI O1 Mini on certain benchmarks. DeepSeek has largely replicated O1 Mini and has open sourced it, tweeted Perplexity CEO Aravind Srinivas. DeepSeek did not reply to MIT Technology Review's request for comments. Despite the buzz around R1, DeepSeek remains relatively unknown. Based in Hangzhou. Oh yeah, I've been to Hangzhou. It's like a little south of Shanghai on the coast there, China. It was founded in July 2023 by Liang Wangfeng, an alumnus of Zhejiang University. Yes, that's a very good university. A lot of tech people. Yes, I met them. They were like students of mine when I was in grad school. Yeah, they also became PhD students and master students. With a background in information and electronic engineering, it was incubated by High Flyer, a hedge fund that Liang founded in 2015. Like Sam Altman. Yeah, that's a funny thing about like Altman, right? He got Bankman Fried, Altman. Come on. Bankman. And then now you got Altman, alternative man, AI. You know, is this universe a simulation? I always think so. I think this universe is a simulation. It's just playing a prank on me, man. Right? So, okay, like Sam Altman of OpenAI, Liang aims to build artificial general intelligence, AGI, a form of AI that can match or even beat humans on a range of tasks, right? Altman, alternative man. Anyway, training large language models, LLMs, requires a team of highly trained researchers and substantial computing power. In a recent interview with the Chinese media outlet Late Post, Kai-Fu Lee, a veteran entrepreneur and former head of Google China, said that only front row players typically engage in building foundation models such as ChatGPT, as it's so resource intensive. The situation is further complicated by the US export controls on advanced semiconductors. High Flyer's decision to venture into AI is directly related to these constraints. However, long before the anticipated sanctions, Liang acquired a substantial stockpile of NVIDIA A100 chips, a type now banned from export to China. The Chinese media outlet 36KR estimates that the company has over 10,000 units in stock. But Dylan Patel, founder of the AI research consultancy Semi-Analysis, yeah, that's a famous one, famous blog. I think yeah, that blog had something about Intel getting merged or bought out. Yeah, they always make rumors, huh? Estimates that it has at least 50,000. Recognizing the potential of this stockpile for AI training is what led Liang to establish DeepSeek, which was able to use them in combination with the lower power chips to develop its models. Tech giants like Alibaba and ByteDance, as well as a handful of startups with deep-pocketed investors, dominate the Chinese AI space, making it challenging for small or medium-sized enterprises to compete. A company like DeepSeek, which has no plans to raise funds, is rare. Zihan Wang, the former DeepSeek employee, told MIT Technology Review that he had access to abundant computing resources and was given freedom to experiment when working at DeepSeek, a luxury that few fresh graduates would get at any company. So when I was in graduate school and a lot of these PhD students went back home to China to work and be professors or lead companies, their focus was essentially to develop homegrown CPUs that could run open source. Okay, they were based on MIPS architecture. Now we have RISC-V, I guess. Nowadays, that's what a lot of people are doing for open source chip development, but outside of ARM, right? Although if you do ARM, you got to pay a license. But at that point, it was focused mainly on that. So during my time, yeah, I was recommending a lot of people to look into AI. And this was around probably 2008 to 2010 to 2013. I was doing that. And like, we weren't at the point where we are now. That was like, people were just starting to think about like how to improve like the whole, I guess back then it was mostly called machine learning, and there was a regression model and all this stuff. Yeah, we weren't at this level as we are now. But yeah, I could tell right away this was the way things were going in research circles. And that was the easy way to get funding, you know. And Google was knee deep in that stuff. So Google was definitely one of the people's that were interested in developing that model further. So yeah, you can look up machine learning, neural networks, and then it became deep learning. And then from there, now we have large language models. Yeah, so all that stuff was infancy, okay, at that point. In an interview with Chinese media outlet 36KR in July 2024, Liang said that an additional challenge Chinese companies face on top of chip sanctions is that their AI engineering techniques tend to be less efficient. Most Chinese companies, have to consume twice the computing power to achieve the same results. Combined with data efficiency gaps, this could mean needing up to 4 times more computing power. Our goal is to continuously close these gaps, he said. But DeepSeek found ways to reduce memory usage and speed up calculation without significantly sacrificing accuracy. There you go. You see, nowadays, people are so used to having chunks of memory and things. That's why StreamYard, Streamlabs, like OBS. Like, dude, bruh, every time I run this crap, like, you suck up all my memory. Like, I have plenty of memory. Back in the old days, you could run plenty of stuff with the amount of memory I had in my laptop, like, which is now what, freaking 6 years old laptop. Like, there's barely any improvement in computing and memory, because once we had solid state disks and advanced virtual memory caching, like Windows and Mac OS, they do a great job in memory management. So these people just are so lazy now that they rely on this technology to make lazy code, right? So if we restrict it, let's go back to the old days of 1980s and force people to do their own memory management. You probably wouldn't have all the issues we have with StreamYards and Streamlabs, huh? So anyway, yes. So restrictions are good, I think. The necessity creates the mother of all inventions. All right. So the team loves turning a hardware challenge into an opportunity for innovation. Oh, there we go. Liang himself remains deeply involved in DeepSeek's research process, running experiments alongside his team. The whole team shares a collaborative culture and dedication to hardcore research, Wang says. As well as prioritizing efficiency, Chinese companies are increasingly embracing open source principles. Alibaba Cloud has released over 100 new open source AI models supporting 29 languages and catering to various applications, including coding and mathematics. Similarly, startups like Minimax and 01.ai have open sourced their models. According to a white paper released last year by the China Academy of Information and Communications Technology, a state-affiliated research institute, the number of AI large language models worldwide has reached 1,328, with 36% originating in China. This positions China as the second largest contributor to AI behind the United States. Well, there you go. Now you got that Stargate program, don't you? This generation of young Chinese researchers identify strongly with open source culture because they benefit so much from it, says Thomas Qitong Chow, an assistant professor of technology policy at Tufts University. The U.S. export control has essentially backed Chinese companies into a corner where they have to be far more efficient with their limited computing resources, says Matt Sheehan, an AI researcher at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. We are probably going to see a lot of consolidation in the future related to the lack of compute. That might already have started to happen. 2 weeks ago, Alibaba Cloud announced that it has partnered with the Beijing based startup 01.ai, founded by Kai-Fu Lee, to merge research teams and establish an industrial large model laboratory. It is energy efficient and natural for some kind of division of labor to emerge in the AI industry, says Howe, the Tufts professor. The rapid evolution of AI demands agility from Chinese firms to survive. The race is on. This is your Sputnik. And I don't think any of you guys remember Sputnik. Sputnik was a watershed moment. Russia launched a satellite into space, and that's what kicked off the whole space race, because America was like, what the hell? These commies got a piece of metal to orbit the Earth? Well, there you go. That's your psyop right there. Where's Stanley? Well, Stanley's probably the only person that remembers Sputnik. He's not here right now. So you can go and wait for Stanley to come back sometime later today. Okay. So we are going on to the next article. So this is from Epoch AI. This was actually a tweet, and I'll show you the tweet. And everything I do here is you can look at the descriptions. Okay, I put all the sources in the description. And this one is very long. I don't think I have time to go through all of this, but you can go to the tweet right here. In a new gradient update, Matthew Barr analyzes the impact of AGI. That's artificial general intelligence. So this is general artificial intelligence on human wages. He concludes that if AGI can fully substitute for human labor, it might cause wages to crash. Eventually, wages may drop below subsistence level, a minimum level required for human survival. Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. Sorry, humans. You're now obsolete. Holy crap. And, they use the Cobb-Douglas production function. That is economics. And that's what inspired me this week. Wasn't that dude went on CNBC to talk about like how, Phillips curve is nonsense, this and that. That's true. The Phillips curve is one of the things that got beaten up a lot during the 70s, during stagflation. And you had a lot of people like Milton Friedman and all these guys, and we'll go over that were trying to debunk Keynesianism. So Keynesian economics was getting like really, really beaten up at that point. And the way the Fed runs now is the Fed uses neo-Keynesian economics. Okay? And they have an alternative version of the Phillips curve. I won't get into that. You guys can look that up. But this really, really shows you that they are thinking already of how AI will affect wages, employment, and that will affect you. Okay? So let's go back to this article. AGI could drive wages below subsistence level. January 24th, 2025, Matthew Barnett. Historically, many have feared that automation would lead to mass unemployment and lower wages. Yet, despite massive improvements in automation in the last 2 centuries, average wages have risen, living standards have improved, and high unemployment has not become a persistent long-term issue as many had expected. This historical pattern has led most economists to adopt the following optimistic view. Automation typically creates at least as many opportunities as it destroys, and its overall impacts on wages are positive. But artificial general intelligence, I don't know if you guys believe in AI or not, but if you do, this is even crazier that you believe in general intelligence. That's artificial. And Sam Altman, has basically said within a year they'll get to that point. Okay, let's see what happens. 2026 will be interesting as fuck. Defined here as a technology that can functionally substitute for human workers in all labor tasks. Many defy these historical precedents. Unlike past technologies, which typically automated specific tasks within industries, AGI has the potential to replace human labor across the entire spectrum of work, including physical tasks and any new tasks that could be created in the future. Because of this, AGI might disrupt labor markets in an unprecedented way. In fact, there is a straightforward case for why developing AGI could drive human wages below subsistence level. Well. You remember UBI, Universal Basic Income? Yeah, all you are gonna get on welfare, bitch. You're all gonna get on welfare. Enjoy that. This argument states that if there are essential but scarce factors of production that cannot be quickly scaled through investment, then these constraints will push down the marginal productivity of labor. Over time, this could drive wages down to the point where they can only barely cover the cost of sustaining labor. If AGIs are fully capable of substituting for labor, this minimum sustaining cost would likely rest below the level required for human survival. The specific dynamics of this argument depend on the time horizon. In the short term, it may turn out to be much easier to accommodate AGIs than traditional physical capital. You guys ever watch Wall-E? I love that movie, Wall-E. Because, it wasn't a normal Pixar movie in the sense that, like, oh yeah, you just laugh and laugh with your... Yeah, bring your kids, watch Wall-E. Wall-E was actually a horrifying movie. Wall-E was basically the future. That's the future. Wall-E. Terrifying. The terrifying, dystopic movie, Wall-E. Packaged in a nice, cute little thing. Oh yeah, you got that little trash compactor robot in love with Ava, whatever. Hilarious. Great movie. because it was scary as hell. That's what that movie was. All right. Will humans as a whole be considered DEI hires? Yes. They will be considered. You better compete with the AI future. Yes. And there are things that humans can do that AI will probably never get to that point in our lifetimes anyway. But it'll be rare, very rare indeed, because the most basic mundane stuff will definitely slowly be picked away one by one. And I would say, like, this is probably a solution to like having more babies that Elon Musk keeps trying to get people to do. China's already in a demographic spiral. Like it's gonna be like Japan over there. Actually, I heard some rumors that the Chinese government was gonna monitor women's menstrual cycles or something, and try to force them to have kids. Like, yeah, it's serious. So AI is definitely a solution, because they would say like, oh shoot, these guys won't have kids anymore. They're watching too much porn and doing OnlyFans, and women are just like doing career stuff. So women don't want to have kids. Yeah, so all this stuff will be solved by AI. This is a quick fix. Yeah, that's probably it. Anyhow, let's continue on this article. Yes, let's see. In the short term, it may turn out to be much easier to accumulate AGIs than traditional physical capital, i.e. humans, making physical capital the scarce factor that limits productivity and pushes wages downwards. Okay. And the other thing also with not only humans, right? Humans are pieces of capital. I would say at this point, we are a service economy. We are not a manufacturing economy like it used to be. All right. So yet there is also a reasonable chance that technological progress could counteract this effect by making labor more productive, allowing wages to remain stable or even rise. Over the long run, however, the pace of technological progress is likely to slow down, making it increasingly difficult for wages to remain high. At that point, the key constraints are likely to be fundamental resources like land and energy, okay? Essential inputs that cannot be expanded through investment. This makes it highly plausible that human wages will fall below subsistence level in the long run. Oh boy. Jeez. Well, so in that case, on this paragraph's word, even if they did have a bunch of kids, it didn't matter anyway. I can't produce enough farmland to feed their asses, right? So you have to do hydroponics, genetic manipulation of crops, synthetic meat, which is really what that's for. All the technologies you see that's being developed now is essentially to get to the point where you can go to space. You can't have cows in space, all right? They take up a lot of resources. If you put a cow in a spaceship, all right, you're not going to have a farmland on your spaceship. So everything you do, synthetics, hydroponics, all this stuff is developed for a reason. And so that's why when you look at Elon, go to Mars, it doesn't matter about Mars. The whole goal is to develop technologies. And that's why you look at all the startups that Elon has done, like the boring company where you bore tunnels under the earth, all that stuff, which is very useful if you go to Mars. Like you can live underground like Mole Men, right? Like Planet of the Apes type stuff where all the humans are underground. Yeah, John Deere. Yeah, John Deere. Yes, that's right. That's why Deere, I like Deere stock. The way the chart looks, Deere looks like it's ready to pop even higher. So you're looking for stocks like that for sure. Anyway, let's continue. Informed by these arguments, I would guess that there is roughly a 1 in 3 chance that human wages will crash below subsistence level within 20 years, and a 2 in 3 chance that wages will fall below subsistence level within the next 100 years. Why wages will plausibly fall after AGI? Here, I present a straightforward argument that, while not airtight, indicates that AGI will plausibly cause human wages to fall below subsistence level. This argument relies on the concept of diminishing returns, although the full version of the argument requires an understanding of decreasing returns to scale in production. To explain this argument, consider the standard Cobb-Douglas production function. Yeah, you can go to Wiki, figure this out. This is what economists will use. All right, which takes the following form: Y of LK. L and K are independent variables here, so I don't know if you guys know math. Okay, Y is the output function of L and K. L and K are the inputs. Okay, so A times L to the power of A times K to the power of B, with A greater than 0, B greater than 0, and A plus B less than equal to 1. All right, so assuming you find out what A and B are, you can have a curve based on like the movement of L and K, two variables, and a constant A, I guess. So let's go through this. Here, Y represents GDP, A represents productivity or technology level, and L and K denotes the factors of production, labor and capital, respectively. So L is labor, K is capital. This function is useful for understanding wages because of how wages are determined in a competitive market. In short, a widely accepted economic model states that in the absence of externalities, wages should equal the marginal product of labor, the additional output generated by one more unit of labor. The wage paid to workers can be found by taking the partial derivative of the output with respect to labor as shown below. So if you took calculus, I take a derivative of Y with respect to L, partial derivative meaning I'm only taking into account L and not K. All right, so I derive based on L. This equation reveals that there are a few avenues for raising wages. So right now we're just focusing on labor and not capital. Okay, that's why we're doing partial derivative here. For instance, by advancing technology or equivalently elevating parameter A, wages will rise. Increasing the capital stock K can also increase wages by giving workers more tools to produce output, but we can also see diminishing returns to this approach since wages are proportional to K to the power of A when A is between 0 and 1. That's important right there. So when A is a fraction, all right, you are going to get a asymptote. So I don't know, this is more math stuff. So if Portia was here, she can explain all this for you. This relationship implies that the increase to wages from additional capital declines with greater capital. Okay, so let's put it this way. I can fill up my tank in my car up to the full max, right? So if I keep filling up my tank, you think my car is going to get better? So if I keep putting more gasoline in my car, will it become a Ferrari? No, right? So you can kind of think of it. That's a pretty bad analogy, but that's the one I can come up right now. But you can think of it like that. So if I keep pushing some fuel into my car, you think it's going to go faster? It's going to get better? No, right? So I mean, of course, yeah. Of course, if it's 0, there's no fuel in the tank, I can't even move, right? But yeah, you kind of guess like how it goes. There's a limit. There's basically a limit to how you can improve something. Okay, and so that's what they call diminishing returns. So yeah, what's up, Antoine? What's up, Garen? What's up, Tropes? Yes. Aliens has a lot of cows to figure that out. Had to mutilate. Yeah. Well, all-seeing guy. We're in a fishbowl right now. So anyway, now consider the last part of the equation, the L to B minus 1. When B is between 0 and 1, we know that wages must diminish monotonically in the labor supply. Below, I plotted an example of what could look like using completely made-up numbers. All right, so that's what the Twitter post was about. So the labor supply goes up and down here, and you see wages go down when there's tons of people needing to go to work. Wages go up when there's less people going to work, and you got the productivity of Y going this way, the other direction. Okay. This property implies that introducing additional labor to the economy will, all else being equal, drive wages downward. This is important because if AGI can fully substitute for human labor, then deploying AGI on a large scale will be equivalent to massively increasing the supply of labor L. As a result, the marginal productivity of labor will decline, driving wages down. Therefore, unless this effect is counterbalanced by a comparable increase in capital or technological advancements. I guess like Star Trek, right? The expansion of the labor force through AGI decreases wages in this model. I believe this outcome is plausible if AGIs can be scaled up at a much faster rate than traditional physical capital. Since AGIs exist as software running on computer or robotic hardware, their numbers can increase at least as rapidly as new hardware can be manufactured. In such a scenario, the economy could become rapidly saturated with AGIs, flooding the labor market with an abundance of highly capable workers. If there is no equally massive expansion of physical infrastructure such as factories, roads, and other capital that enhances labor productivity, the result will be a sharp decline in the marginal productivity of labor. This, in turn, will cause human wages to crash. Okay, so that's why did I say Star Trek? Because that's the only way out of it, right? So that's why you see Elon Musk always talk about space. Because the only way you would need more humans to outstrip the rate of increasing artificial intelligence productivity is to make them work in things where robots probably are not ill-suited at this moment to do. So by focusing your goals on ridiculous projects like green energy, right? Making synthetic meat, doing drug experiments with mRNA. You're creating new work. You're trying to generate more work to offset the potential of artificial intelligence to replace all the work that we had done in the past. So this is important to understand, right? So it's always a game. It's always a game. So the big guys on top, the powers that be, right? The powers that be. So that's why you use the TB, the powers that be. You know, you can say the Illuminati or whatever. It doesn't matter. But the people on the top, they already know this. So they have to plan ahead. All right? So you're going to look at the powers that be right here. The core idea behind this argument is that capital can act as a bottleneck to production. If the labor supply grows much faster than capital, then the limited availability of traditional capital will constrain overall productivity. This happens because of diminishing returns in the production function. When you add more workers without a corresponding increase in other essential resources, each additional worker contributes less to the overall output. As a result, the marginal productivity of labor declines, causing wages to fall. To justify the claim that traditional physical capital might be much harder to scale than AGIs, one can point to the existence of numerous forms of physical capital that we consider harder to grow than the hardware that underlies AGI. For instance, doubling the size of the US railroad network would be a monumental challenge requiring extensive planning and a slow permitting process. In contrast, the global supply of compute measured in flops, that's floating point operations, okay? Floating point operations right there. Routinely doubles every few years. These constraints loosely suggest that once it becomes feasible to deploy AGIs widely, their numbers will grow rapidly, quickly saturating existing physical infrastructure. This rapid expansion of labor supply could drive down the marginal productivity of human labor, sharply cutting wages in a short period of time. Nevertheless, the argument I have just presented is imprecise and potentially misleading. In the real world, deploying AGI won't just increase the labor input L in the production function. Instead, all three of these factors, labor, capital, and technology, are likely to grow together. For example, AGIs could help us build physical infrastructure more quickly, and they can substitute for human researchers, accelerating technological progress. These effects would counterbalance the negative effects of AGIs on wages. Therefore, to fully understand the trajectory of human wages, it is useful to examine a generalized version of this argument in which multiple factors of production can be scaled simultaneously. This general argument relies on the concept of returns to scale. Okay, returns to scale describe how total output responds to all factors of production are increased simultaneously and proportionally. Recall our earlier production function, y of L and K is a times L to the power of A times K to the power of B. The nature of these returns is directly related to the sum of the exponents A plus B. If the sum of the exponents is exactly 1, then the economy experiences constant returns to scale. This means that when labor and capital are increased by the same proportion, output increases by that exact same proportion, regardless of the initial levels of labor and capital. We can represent this property using the following equation: y of CL, CK, CY of L and K. For example, if both labor and capital are increased by 10%, total output will also increase by exactly 10%. This holds true no matter how large and small the economy is at the outset. In this case, wages remain constant if we scale all factors of production simultaneously. The intuition behind this assumption can be understood through the duplication argument. This argument asks us to imagine what would happen if we perfectly duplicated every aspect of the economy. Every worker, every tool, every machine, every piece of land, everything, so that there were 2 identical Earths in space. If this duplication were truly exact, then the total output of both economies would be twice as large as before. This supports the idea that an economy should exhibit constant returns to scale as long as all factors of production can be scaled up together. However, if the sum of the exponents is less than 1, then the economy experiences decreasing returns to scale. Okay? So that's where the asymptote comes in. That's why when I said earlier, everything was a fraction, everything was less than 1, up here, you would hit a wall in this equation. Okay? This is important. That's why they were scaling this where A and B was less than 1, greater than 0. A and B plus B is less than 1, then that's it. We cannot scale unless we have a second Earth. Where's that second Earth? Why do you think they're going to Mars? Right? Why do you think they want people to go to Mars? It's not because we want to go to Mars. It's because they already know this problem is existing. So everything at this point is to get to Mars. Now, let's say Mars is not real. Doesn't matter. You're developing technologies to go to places that are inhospitable to humanity right now. So guess what? There's a huge landmass at the bottom of the Earth, right? At the South Pole. What's that called? Antarctica. So all the technology you're developing to go to Mars is useful for living in a place like Antarctica. There's plenty of land in Antarctica. One part of Antarctica is what a fraction of Earth could be, right? You could dump a whole bunch of useless eaters, humans that are useless, into Antarctica and go make them work at Whole Foods. That's what they're thinking right now. If I was like some scheming motherfucker, that's what I would be thinking right now. So you look at that duplication argument right there. They know that, hey, how am I going to get these humans to be useful to me while I get rich? Well, dump them in Antarctica. All the technology that's going to Mars right now is going to Antarctica. So you better know the game plan, guys. You better know the game plan. Anyway, let's continue. Let's continue with the math here. So, yeah, this is pretty good. This is a pretty good article. I like this one. However, if the sum of the exponents is less than 1, yep, then the economy experiences decreasing returns to scale, right? This means that even when labor and capital are increased simultaneously and proportionally, the resulting increase in total output is less than proportional. In other words, doubling both labor and capital would lead to less than double the total output. Your diminishing returns. At first glance, this possibility may seem counterintuitive given the duplication argument, which suggests that an economy should naturally exhibit constant returns to scale. So why might decreasing returns to scale occur in reality? The key reason is the existence of additional factors of production that cannot be increased simply by investing more capital or creating new workers. So if I pay people more money, they'll work harder, right? If I pay more people more money, they'll become geniuses, right? If I pay people more money, they'll actually do what I say and create better technology, right? No. Okay. So Land is one example of such a factor, but this could really be any scarce, non-accumulable resource that constrains production. To illustrate decreasing returns to scale, consider a more general production function that includes land. So we're adding another argument into this function here, W, as an additional input, where A plus B plus C equals 1, ensuring constant returns to scale in all factors. Here we assume that A and B and C are greater than 0. In this formulation, the economy exhibits constant returns to scale when all three inputs, labor, capital, and land, can be increased together. However, by assumption, land cannot be increased through investment, and thus remains fixed over time at a constant level. As a consequence of this constraint, the production function can be simplified to y of L and K, A times C times L to the A, K to the B, where C is a constant, representing W to the C power C. Since the exponents of A and B's sum is less than 1, this production function experiences decreasing returns to scale in terms of labor and capital together. In other words, as labor and capital increase, their productivity is constrained by the fixed supply of land, which prevents output from scaling up proportionally. In this scenario, wages decline if we scale labor and capital simultaneously. So is this scenario realistic? Actually, yes. For thousands of years before the Industrial Revolution, arable land was scarce, meaning that as populations grew, agricultural productivity faced diminishing returns. Because technological progress was too slow to counteract the declining productivity of land, anybody talk about Sumerians, Egyptians? So all the old empires that rose and fell. Okay. Because technological progress was way too slow to counteract the declining productivity of land, wages inevitably fell to subsistence levels, trapping most people in extreme poverty. This economy was characterized by Malthusian dynamics. So I don't know if you guys know about Malthusian dynamics. Maybe we have to take a detour, because this is pretty important, actually. So there's something called the Malthusian trap, and I don't know if you guys know about the rat experiment. Like, yeah, that's pretty much like that, right? You got all these rats living in, like, yeah, the big rat experiment. I forgot what it's called, but it was famous, the rat experiment. So let me actually, yeah, the AI actually has a good description of it. The Malthusian trap is a theory that population growth outpaces the growth of resources, which leads to lower living standards and a population decline. So this theory actually governs a lot of what you heard back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, where people were like, oh, you shouldn't have a lot of kids, blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, a lot of people in my generation, Gen X to early millennials, they believe that stuff. So that's why you see a lot of people not having kids. Was this a psyop too? Was this a psyop? I don't know. The Malthusian trap is named after Thomas Malthus, an English economist who wrote an essay on the principle of population in 1798. The theory states that population growth is exponential, while growth of resources is linear. As the population grows, the pressure on resources increases, which limits further population growth. The theory predicts that improvements in living standards are only possible when a large portion of the population dies. The theory also predicts that poverty and inequality will increase as the price of resources increases. So the Malthusian trap can lead to famine, war, societal collapse. The theory has been used by environmentalists and social scientists to argue that population growth puts unsustainable pressure on the Earth's resources. And yeah, so that's kind of where people get this idea. And then it got repackaged into global warming and all that stuff. So all this stuff, like, what is it? Is it a psyop? Is it done on purpose to keep you from having kids? I don't know. In any case, interesting thing to ponder, right? So yes, the rat utopia. That's what it was. The rat utopia. Although, yeah, people try to debunk that many times. They say like this and that. So I don't know if how much you want to put validity in the rat utopia, but yeah, you can look this up on Google. You look up Malthusian and all that stuff. You'll find all this. Yeah. So let's get back to the article. So is this scenario realistic, right? So wages decline if we scale labor and capital simultaneously for thousands of years, right? We got to the Malthusian dynamics, right? Reasons for temporary optimism. The historical precedent of Malthusian dynamics, which characterized the world economy before the Industrial Revolution, suggests that similar forces could reemerge in the future. As discussed earlier, this could take the form of physical capital acting as a bottleneck for production, while AGIs are rapidly scaled. In this scenario, human wages could once again fall as the supply of AGI-driven labor outstrips the available infrastructure needed for productive work. However, focusing exclusively on this historical precedent would ignore what happened after the Industrial Revolution, which represented a fundamental break from these dynamics. After the Industrial Revolution, the rate of innovation increased, eventually outpacing population growth. When this occurred, it led to sustained increases in marginal productivity of labor. As a result, wages rose above subsistence level during improving living standards for the first time in history. Now, I think you guys need to look at your history books and learn about the cotton gin or the mill. So the steam engine, all these pieces of technology that are very crucial. Let me see. Mills. There's a good documentary about mills from PBS way back when. Let's see if I can find it. Someone posted all that stuff online for free. I'll give you a link. You guys should watch it. So then you understand where all these arguments are coming from. You know, we're at another turning point in history. So back in the old days, you know, you didn't have mills, right? So how did you make clothes? So people had to hand stitch it, right? They had to get cotton and wool manually. Yeah, printing press is a definite important innovation, but mills are even more important because otherwise, you know, you had all these women in these factories making clothes by hand. They had to first get yarn, threads from the fiber, right? Turn them into fabric from animals. And that was a labor-intensive process. So once you had mills, you had water power. You took advantage of rivers. And that's why you look at the north, right? Like, look at Rhode Island. Look at all those places. All the factories were built next to water sources. So they were taking advantage of gravity as an energy source. So you had hydrology. So you had water flowing from the mountains to the sea. And you're taking the advantage of that to turn a wheel, and the wheel would turn machines that could generate labor. So, you know, AI is just another form of that. Now, the question is whether AI is disruptive enough to destroy and change all economies. And then once they figured out how to generate energy without using the rivers, then they could move the factories to the south, you know, so they didn't need to have factories built along the rivers. Once they figured out steam engines and things like that, you didn't need to have simple hydrology. So these things came around during that time, and that's why you got the Civil War and all this stuff. Yeah, water-powered loom. Yep. That's what it was. And so there was a great documentary from PBS that was all about that. So let me see if I can find it. Oh, yeah, I found it. Right here. Very good. You know, PBS had like really good documentaries back in the day. So go here. Go to this YouTube link. All right. So yeah, I'll put it here for you to see. So this was called PBS Mill Times. David Macaulay. David Macaulay made a lot of different documentaries about Rome, about castles, about the pyramids. So it's pretty good, pretty good. This anime program centers on a New England community similar to Pawtucket, Rhode Island. There we go, Rhode Island, where Samuel Slater established America's first textile mill. There you go. So very important. And all this stuff was probably like all this stuff was probably the genesis for feminism and labor rights and all this stuff too. So, like I said, you know, this stuff is not new. Things have been set on a trend, and when you look at a trend on a chart, you know where things are going. Nothing that's happening now should be a surprise to you. Okay. So yeah, look it up. PBS Mill Times, David Macaulay. Yeah, great, very good documentary. You can watch that, and you can see, like, you can compare this to what's happening now. Okay, and even like with that, like let me go even further back in history. So I think you guys need to know about like Greek history too here. So the Delian League. Okay, so you're looking about EU, NATO, the US dominating everyone. Well, dude, bruh, this ain't new. This was like done many years ago. Okay, so the Delian League was a confederacy of Greek city-states numbering between 150 and 330, founded in 478 BC under the leadership of Athens, okay, whose purpose was to continue fighting the Persian Empire after the Greek victory in the Battle of Plataea at the end of the Second Persian invasion of Greece. Right? Like, so you guys probably only know this from like King Leonidas and the 300, right? In Thermopylae. But hey, look, what happened after that? The league functioned as a dual offensive and defensive alliance, Symmachia, of autonomous states similar to its rival association, the Peloponnesian League. The league's modern name derives from its official meeting place, the island of Delos, where congresses were held within the sanctuary of the Temple of Apollo. Contemporary authors refer to the organization simply as the Athenians and their allies. While Sparta excelled as Greece's greatest power on land, Athens turned to the seas, becoming the dominant naval power of the Greek world. Following Sparta's withdrawal from the conflict with Persia, Athens took the lead of the Hellenic alliance, accompanied by several states around the Aegean and Anatolian coast. The Delian League was formed as an anti-Persian defensive association of equal city-states, seeking protection under Athens, as the latter wished to extend its support towards the Ionian Greek colonies of Anatolia. Well, you know, what are we doing in Ukraine? What's up with NATO? Why did Finland and Sweden, all these countries that didn't want to get in NATO, join NATO now? So who's the Persian Empire these days? Makes you think, don't it? Okay. By the mid-5th century BC, the alliance had developed into a naval imperial power called the Athenian Empire, where Athens established complete dominion and the allies became increasingly less autonomous. The alliance held an assembly of representatives in order to shape its policy, while the members swore an oath of loyalty to the coalition. The Delian League successfully accomplished its principal strategic goal by decisively expelling the remaining Persian forces from the Aegean. As a result, Persia would cease to pose a major threat to Greece for the following 50 years. So why do we have NATO if the Soviet Union is gone now? So why do we still have that? Makes you think, huh? From its inception, Athens became the League's biggest source of military power, while more and more allies preferred to pay the dues in cash. Athens began to use the League's funds for its own purposes, like the reinforcement of its naval supremacy. which led to conflicts between the city and its less powerful allies, at times culminating in rebellions like that of Thalos in 465 BC. The League's treasury initially stood in Delos until, in a symbolic gesture, Pericles moved it to Athens in 454 BC. By 431 BC, the threat of the League presented to Spartan hegemony combined with Athens' heavy-handed control of the Delian League prompted the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War. The League was dissolved upon the war's conclusion in 404 BC under the direction of Lysander, the Spartan commander. Witnessing Sparta's growing hegemony in the first half of the 4th century BC, Athens went on to partially revive the alliance, this time called the Second Athenian League, establishing its naval dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. Well, I think you guys should read up on that stuff, because it kind of sounds like what we're going to do with China. So if you think about China as the Peloponnesian League and the US is the Delian League, right? The BRICS. You heard of BRICS, didn't you? So right now the BRICS is an economic alliance, but I could see in the future it could be a defensive alliance, especially what we're doing with Russia right now. So yeah, you guys should read up on your history. This stuff doesn't repeat exactly, but it does rhyme. It does rhyme. So yes, this is important stuff. And the funny thing is, let me see, democratic. Like look at down here. Look at down here. The Delian League, also known as the Athenian Empire, was a collective of Greek city-states based around the Aegean Sea, which operate under the hegemony of Athens. This alliance initially served the purpose of coordinating a united Greek front against a perceived looming Persian threat against the Ionian city-states which bordered it. The members of the Delian League were made to swear an oath of loyalty to the League and contributed mostly monetarily, but in some instances, donated ships and other forces. It was also the case that many democratic members of the League owed their freedom from oligarchic or tyrannical rule to Athens. Because of this, Athens gained an overwhelming advantage in the voting system conducted by relying on the support of democratic city-states Athens had helped into being. Don't you guys remember when Bush was doing like the axis of evil or whatever, and we were spreading democracy everywhere? Doesn't that sound familiar? So Athens was going around in ancient Greece spreading democracy everywhere, and then everyone has to swear fealty, bend the knee to America. Well, hey, this stuff sounds familiar, doesn't it? Okay, anyhow, let's continue on. Back to the AI stuff here. Let's see, where were we at? Blah, blah, blah. Man. I went on a detour and I forgot where we're going. When this occurred, it led to sustained increases in the marginal productivity of labor. As a result, wages rose above subsistence level, durably improving living standards for the first time in history. If we naively extrapolate this post-industrial revolution trend into the future, it suggests that the introduction of AGI into the economy could drive innovation at an even faster rate, more than compensating for any negative impact the technology will have on wages. While the scarcity of physical capital might still constrain production, the acceleration of technological progress could outweigh this effect. Under this straightforward projection, an optimistic scenario emerges. AGI-driven innovation could dramatically boost labor productivity, ultimately raising human wages rather than pushing them downward. I believe this optimistic outlook is plausible in the short run and will likely persist for many years, including after AGI is widely deployed. However, I don't expect it to last indefinitely. In the long run, it still seems more likely that human wages will decline, eventually falling below subsistence levels. Long-term pessimism about wages. Ultimately, the idea of AGI will permanently raise wages through innovation is fundamentally undermined by the following fact. There are limits to technological innovation. In other words, there are absolute physical constraints that place an upper bound on how far technological progress can advance. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that we are currently close to reaching these limits. On the contrary, I believe we are still far from them. My point, however, is that these constraints impose unavoidable restrictions on our ability to permanently innovate, i.e., grow the productivity parameter A in our model forever at a constant rate. To demonstrate these limits, consider the implications of maintaining even a modest annual productivity growth of just 1% over the next 30,000 years. This would increase productivity by staggering factor of approximately 10 to the 129, a quantity vastly exceeding the number of atoms in the observable universe. Such an improvement in productivity would defy our basic intuitions about what is physically possible over such a period of time. Unless these intuitions are fundamentally mistaken, it is unlikely that we will achieve such a feat. The inherent limits to technological innovation suggest the existence of two regimes. The first regime, when we are still far from hitting the absolute physical limits of technical progress, the economy experiences increasing returns to scale. This occurs because a large population of AGIs and humans fosters more innovation, which in turn increases the efficiency of economic production. During this regime, technological progress might happen quickly enough that its positive impact on wages outweighs any downward pressure from other economic constraints such as land and energy. As a result, wages could continue to rise, sustained by the ongoing improvements of efficiency resulting from technological progress. However, as we continue innovating, we will eventually enter the second regime, one in which we approach the physical limits of technological progress. In this regime, we will cease to have a meaningful rate of innovation. At this point, there will no longer be sufficient technological progress to counteract the productivity losses caused by increasing scarcity of non-accumulable factors of production. As a result, the constraints imposed by non-accumulable resources will mirror our historical experience prior to the Industrial Revolution, with population growth pushing wages down. Well, there you go. I think that's good enough. You guys can read the rest of this with the description, right? There's description in there where we have all these articles there. And yeah, this is going to be interesting times. I think this is going to be interesting times. Okay, next one. Let's go and continue on. So I want you guys to go back to the previous charting the course, January 9th. I did this one in January 9th. And if you go back there, I was reading this article. So you can go there, charting the course. I called it Fed Talk 3, the search of for liquidity, making a play on Star Trek, I guess. And we can go back to here, and I'll read some of this. Fed minutes show Wall Street pushed back expected end of balance sheet drawdown. January 8th, Michael Derby. Wall Street's biggest banks have pushed back the expected endgame for the Federal Reserve's ongoing efforts to shrink the size of the balance sheet. So why am I going back here? Because we are entering a war between the Fed and Trump. And if you went back to 2018, this is when that war began. When Trump appointed Jerome Powell as the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Okay, and if you look at the stock market, how it behaved then, you can have some idea how the stock market will behave now. Okay, and we are back to where we were here, where we don't have QE, we got QT. We have Trump trying to do tariffs, tax cuts, all these things that were the same issues as it was back in 2018. Banks told the Fed ahead of the December policy meeting that they saw this process ending in June of this year. A little later than what they had told the Fed ahead of the November policy meeting, in the minutes of the December Federal Open Market Committee, FOMC, recounting a briefing by a New York Fed official responsible for implementing monetary policy. The Fed's most recent meeting, held in December 17th to 18th, saw officials trim their interest rate target range by a quarter percentage point between 4.25 and 4.5% cut back expectations of future rate cuts and raised their estimated path for inflation. At the meeting, the Fed did not announce anything new on its balance sheet drawdown, QT, okay, quantitative tightening, but it did make a technical change in the rate paid on its reverse repo facility to help induce money market funds and others to move cash off the Fed's books and into private markets. The Fed's update on the outlook for the Fed's balance sheet comes as many are looking to 2025 as the year the central bank ends its effort to shrink its holdings via a process returned as quantitative tightening, or QT. After more than doubling size of its holdings in 2022 on an aggressive spate of bond buying driven by COVID-19 pandemic, the Fed has been working to shed holdings of Treasury and mortgage bonds to eliminate excessive liquidity. Right there. So they're going to cut away all that liquidity, right? Guess what? Bye-bye stock market. That's taken Fed holdings from a peak of 9 trillion to under 7 trillion. In shedding bonds, the Fed seeks to reduce liquidity levels to a point where money markets can have normal amounts of volatility and the central bank retains firm control over the federal funds target rate range as its primary tool to influence the economy's momentum. The challenge for the Fed has been that it's very hard to know when it's taken out too much liquidity, and overshooting the mark can lead to significant market churn, which the Fed has sought to avoid in the current episode by slowing the pace of the balance sheet drawdown. That was what happened in 2018. So if you want to know what's going to happen in 2025, look back at 2018. That's pretty simple. Okay. And let me skip ahead. Let's go to this article here. Fed is behind, but still screwing up. This was written in April 13, 2018. And if you look at this, this is the Fed funds rate in black. And then you see the bonds here, the T-note, 2-year yield following that. So let's see what's happened in the 1990s. Oh, tech boom. Oops, crash. Greenspan working on his legacy by fueling a housing bubble. Whoops, 2008 crash. And now we're here from 2010, I guess, 2009, 2010. And then now we're having a bubble, right? So this was written in 2018. Make me emperor for a day, and I would compel the FOMC to outsource interest rate policy to the bond market. Why should we pay 12 experts, most with expensive Ivy League PhD degrees, to do what the bond market can do far more efficiently and cheaply? This week's chart compares the 2-year T-note yield to the stated Fed funds target rate. The FOMC has actually said that the target rate is 1.5 to 1.75%. So I'm splitting the difference by calling it 1.65%. What this chart shows is that first, the two interest rates are very strongly correlated over time, which is what one would expect. But second, and more importantly, the 2-year yield knows best what the Fed should do, and the Fed screws up when it does not listen. If the FOMC would just set the Fed's funds target to within a quarter point of wherever the 2-year T-note yield is, we would have far fewer and quieter bubbles, and also much less severe economic downturns. For whatever reason, the FOMC members have not learned this lesson. None of them, as far as I know, is a subscriber, which is their loss. The Taylor rule for setting short-term rates is an equation moving figures for GDP, inflation rate, and potential output, all of which are numbers which can be fudged by statisticians. The McClellan rule is much simpler. Listen to the 2-year T-note yield, which the statisticians cannot monkey around with. By this rule, the Fed is being overly stimulative by setting the Fed's fund rate target well below where it ought to be. In other words, the Fed is being too loose with interest rate policy according to this measure. But complicating that equation is what else the Fed is doing. In terms of liquidating its holdings of Treasury debt and mortgage-backed securities, MBS, During 3 separate rounds of quantitative easing, the Fed got up to total holdings of 4.25 trillion. At the most rapid rate of acquisition, the Fed was buying up 85 billion per month in 2014. In 2017, the Fed announced it would be starting to unwind these holdings, slowly at first, but accelerating to a rate of 30 billion per month of quantitative tightening, now in Q2 of 2018, and supposedly going to a rate of 40 billion per month in Q3. So while interest rate policy is arguably stimulative, that effect is counteracted by what the Fed is doing in other ways, sucking liquidity out of the banking system with its QT. So that's where we're going, right? This is what we're doing right now. And if you look at it, the S&P 500, remember, was going up in 2017. And once we hit 2018, it started going up and down, up and down, up and down, like a yo-yo. 2018 was when I started doing trading, because I figured out then that, whoops, the stock market isn't just going to go up easily since 2013. So from 2013, 2014, 2015, the stock market was doing quite well, just like it has been doing for the past couple years. The S&P 500, each year, 2023 and 2024, have been up 20% each of those years. So now we're going to hit a point where we're going to have liquidity problems. And that's why I was going here, this article. And if you look back, we were talking about the repo facility. So also including the outlook for the Fed are ongoing uncertainties around government financing needs during the spring as Donald Trump returns as president. There have also been some hiccups in the private repo market, which led to large volatility at the end of the third quarter, of a level that some banks finally used the Fed's standing repo facility, which provides fast cash to eligible firms. So this repo facility gives you extra juice. So if there's like an issue in the financial plumbing, the banks can always go to the Fed and get more money cheaply. But we are about to enter some point here where this is not going to work. So that's why we got to keep our eyes on this. We definitely are. So you can read this article and continue on here. This was written in 2018. Okay. And then I can read this one here. This other article about what happened in 2019. "2019, the year the Federal Reserve admitted it was wrong." Now, the previous article was suggesting like they were being too accommodative, but it seems like maybe they weren't accommodative enough. Perhaps the COVID pandemic was just an excuse to go back to QE because they were screwed. They were trapped. They painted themselves in a corner. So let's see what this article said in 2019. The Fed did a major pivot on interest rates this year, and central bank leaders realized employment could go a lot lower. This was written December 11, 2019, at the heat of the market correction. The Federal Reserve and its leaders have done something unusual in 2019 for central bankers. They admitted they were wrong in their short and long-term outlook for the U.S. economy. This year of humility at the Fed has led to a dramatic reversal in policy, from hiking interest rates last year to cutting them in 2019, putting the economy on solid footing heading into 2020. Since January, when the Fed began changing course, the Standard & Poor's 500 index has risen more than 600 points, or 25%. The unemployment rate, meanwhile, has fallen from 4% to 3.5%. As Fed leaders completed 2 days of meetings on Wednesday for the final time this year, the pressure is largely off. The stock market is back to record highs. Unemployment is at a 50-year low. Inflation remains tame, and the economy continues to grow at a healthy pace, around 2%, with little chance of a recession. While Donald Trump's trade war continues to inflict harm, the Fed's actions are widely credited to offsetting most of it, at least for the United States. the Fed decided Wednesday to take no major action, leaving the benchmark interest rate in its current range of 1.5 to 1.75%. The vast majority of Fed leaders do not anticipate changing interest rates at all in 2020 because they think the economy will remain in a good place. Well, we all know how 2020 came out. The Fed, under Chair Jerome H. Powell's leadership, made two big admissions this year that laid the foundation for what many have dubbed Powell's pivot or pirouette on policy. The first was acknowledging that the economy wasn't in danger of overheating in the short term. The second was acknowledging that unemployment could go even lower than the Fed thought without any negative side effects, a major revision to how it thinks about the economy's long-run potential. The data is just screaming at them. We can sustain this low unemployment rate for a considerable amount of time without creating inflationary pressures. Said Tim Dewey, an economics professor at the University of Oregon and author of the Fed Watch blog. The Fed spent most of last year concerned that Trump's tax cut would spur a hot economy and rising inflation. Fed leaders anticipated they would need to raise interest rates twice in 2019 to tap the brakes on the economy. None of that came to pass. By January 4th, Powell had a different message, effectively admitting the December 2018 rate hike was a miscalculation. Oh, well, wasn't that? The Fed, he said, would be patient on rate hikes because there was little sign of inflationary spike. By March, the Fed announced a plan to stop selling off its assets it purchased in the great aftermath of the Great Recession. Another sign the Fed was taking its foot off the brakes. So we're going to be heading into this area again, I think. I think you have to understand what happened during those times in late 2018 and see what the whole game was about liquidity and all that. So let's go here. And I'm going to share this other screen for you. So Matt Maley, Miller Tabak, Chief Market Strategist. This was a Bloomberg interview that I was watching, and I took his quote here. This is pretty important here. The Fed didn't care about stock market mid-December 2018 until the junk bond market imploded. That's when they pivoted. Fed cares about fixed income market. Now, if we look here at this plot, so this one was posted on Isabel Net on March 20th, 2023. I took a screenshot of this one. Look at the 2019 repo Fed bank liquidity crisis. If you look here, bank cash largely reserves as a share of total assets. So this rebased in January 2019 before reserves dropped further and the mid-2019 repo crisis. So from 2018 to 2019, the Fed had a little scare. So if you look at that article I was reading before, they were worried about inflation. The unemployment was getting too hot because it was getting lower and lower. So they were more worried about inflation. What did Powell say back in December again? He said like, oh yeah, we're worried about Trump again. We're worried about tax cuts again. We're worried about tariffs again. We're worried about like a hot economy again. We're worried about inflation again. Doesn't that sound familiar? Sounds very familiar. And then in 2019, you see like we hit a low here, September. Repo crisis shows Fed liquidity was not ample. So there's definitely an issue here that we see with the banks during the 2018-2019 time. And I think we are going to have a repeat of that this year. And you got to be aware. And then we were talking about like, oh, look at the yen, right? Yen could have been a trigger. It was a trigger last year. You saw the market correct 10%. off of that yen scare, right? The yen unwinding based in late July into August and lasted until September. That was one trigger. What's the trigger this time? Is it the bank reserves? Is that it? So if you go and look back at my previous stream, I put that link back up there. I'm gonna post it back up in the chat here, and then we go look back. I'm gonna go and put it in this thing, and then you can see me explain that for you. I'll put another link, New York Fed. Okay. And this is the reverse repo. Okay, and I'm gonna zoom out. Okay, I'm gonna zoom out here. So you can see it go up in 2021. So when you have a high reverse repo operation here, as you can see here, that means there's plenty of liquidity they can siphon off to pump the stock market. So once we hit a peak in 2022 into first half of 2023, it started going down. That's when the stock market really started going up. They were using this excess liquidity that they stored up. This is like, you can look at this like energy. And you had a lot of it stored up. And once they were getting rid of their little reverse repos here, and we're back down here, okay, at the bottom, we don't have much room to tap. So it's going to be harder for the stock market to go up because they can't draw anymore from this thing. Once they got rid of their dollars here, they could use that to buy stocks and bonds. But they've run out. They're almost done. They're gonna be done with this year. This thing should go to zero this year. Once you see that happen, guess what? Let's go look back at here. Let's look back at 2018 and 2019. What happened there? Look at that. They had some leftovers, right? 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017. Oh, damn. What happened in the back half of 2018? Barely anything left over. It was like less than 1 billion worth of operations at some point. And then boom, we got COVID. So, is the stock market going to go up anymore? Are we going to worry about DeepSeek? Are we going to work that? These are things that you got to think about. I'm not saying the market's going to crash, but if you expect another 20% on the S&P 500, you better be giving me some really good reasons why it should do that again. So this time around, you can't just go and buy Nvidia stocks or Palantir and whatever and hope for the best. You better be thinking extremely hard about what stocks you really consider buying for the next 2 years. And then once we get to 2026, probably something's going to happen. Okay, so that's what the previous charting the course on 25 January 9th I was talking about. So you can go back and that's exactly what I'm saying right here. Okay, and these things are repeating. These little telltale signs I'm seeing, they're repeating. So we can look at all that before, and I'm just gonna go on and on and on and move on from this. Okay, so let me find what else we gotta look at. Okay, blah blah blah. I think that's good enough. I think you got an idea. Now I want to get into the dollar milkshake theory. All right. Okay, let's get into this one. I don't think I can get through all these articles, but at least I can talk about the dollar milkshake theory. And you can go to that link. I uploaded my PDF here. This is the PDF I was reading on John Galt's right at the beginning. Okay. All right. I'll put this up. So you guys need to understand this one. All right. Let me get my stuff together. And then I'll start reading this one. Okay, all right. There we go. This was written in June 19, 2020. Brent Johnson updating the dollar milkshake theory and 5,000 gold. From the movie, There Will Be Blood. You know what? It doesn't matter if I own your land or not. Even if you have a milkshake, I have a long straw. I put my straw in your milkshake and I will drink it. When I saw that scene, I thought it was a very good analogy for what was going on over the last couple years, which I think will pick up speed in the next couple years. You know, post GFC, Great Financial Crisis, 2008 to 2009, the world's central banks and monetary authorities got tougher, and they printed all these different currencies. They created a currency milkshake of pounds, yen, euros, reals, etc. For a number of reasons, I feel that the United States has the straw. For a few years, we were raising interest rates, and that acted as a straw sucking up the liquidity that the rest of the world was providing. And that's largely why you saw the US markets do what it did. But it wasn't just based on interest rates. Interest rates is the primary, but not the only driver. There's a number of other factors. We have the deepest financial markets in the world. There's a large amount of US dollar denominated debt outside the US that acts as demand for the dollar. The US Navy enforces the dollar as the global reserve currency. The rule of law, the tax policy, the trade policy. There's a number of factors that lead the US to being one of, if not the most hospitable place for foreign capital. I think that acts as a straw that sucks up the global capital, and I expect that will accelerate in a couple years rather than decrease. Now, this was written in 2020, okay? Remember that. My point is not that you shouldn't own gold. My point is that when it comes down to it, people need to have dollars. They don't need to have gold. They may want to have gold, and I may want to have gold. But to operate on the world stage, you need dollars. And when they had to choose between dollars and gold in March, they chose dollars. Now, after we got through that liquidity squeeze, he's talking about like March 2020, right here, the COVID crash. Gold and miners went up faster than anything else. But when liquidity needs come, dollars are favored. I think we still have a short-term pullback before we get to the heart of the chaos where the other economies will break down, and as a result, the US will get some flows from abroad. The point I like to make with regard to what the central banks and the Fed in particular has done, whether in the last 3 months or the last 10 years, is that nothing has been fundamentally solved. There has been no new programs or no new structures to the monetary system, which will keep the problems from the last 10 years from happening again. Everything that has been done builds upon what has already been done. In other words, it ultimately makes the problem bigger. It does not solve it. They paper over it. They extend loans. They provide new loans. They print more money. But it doesn't fix anything. Essentially, the long-term problem is the design of the monetary system itself. Because all money is loaned into existence, and because we have a fractional reserve banking system, and for that kind of system to continue, you have to have a high level of velocity of money, or you need to have an extension of new credit. You have to have one or the other. The design of the monetary system does not have a reverse gear. Okay? Now, this is important here, and that will just tie into make you think a bit about what AI is doing and productivity and all that. There is a problem in our financial plumbing, and they're already thinking of ways to get around it, right? So if the monetary system or the global economy starts to slow down, reverse, contract, it actually breaks the system. The system collapses on itself. And that is why when you get into credit contractions, banking crises, or recessions, depressions, you see the Fed and central banks come in and recollateralize the global monetary system. It is very similar to a margin account. When everything goes up, there's no problem. But the minute things fall, the Fed adds new cash to bring it back up to where it is collateralized appropriately. When money gets loaned into existence, it is created out of thin air. When loans start to default and they default at a high enough rate that the whole system becomes impaired, money disappears. The money supply crashes. That's the definition of a credit crunch. When loans are no longer extended, you can't get access to new financing, and then you default. And then whoever you defaulted on, they don't receive their money, and they can't pay whoever they borrowed from. You get into this reverse spiral. So my point of the Fed, who is creating new dollars but not more dollars, is that they're trying to fill a bucket that has holes in it. So if that bucket is leaking 1 gallon per minute, and you're adding at 1 gallon per minute, you're not putting more water in the bucket. You're just keeping the bucket full. And it's kind of the same thing with the monetary system. When the COVID crisis and the slowdown with the global economy and with dollar loans not getting paid and with the credit crunch, defaults are happening. Money is not being created. The Fed is trying to plug that hole, trying to recollateralize the system right now. They're trying to replace that money that's being destroyed. There is a domestic dollar market. And there is an offset dollar market called euro dollars. Okay, now you guys got to know about the euro dollars. All right, let me go and find the euro dollar. I think I mentioned this some I don't know. I must have mentioned this at least once to you guys or 2 times. Euro dollars. Introduction to euro dollars trading. All right, here we go. From Investopedia. Easily confused with the Euro USD currency pair or Euro Forex futures, Euro dollars have nothing to do with Europe's single currency that was launched in 1999. Rather, Euro dollars are time deposits denominated in US dollars and held in banks outside of the United States. A time deposit is simply an interest-yielding bank deposit with a specified date of maturity. Since the time deposits are not inside U.S. borders, euro dollars are outside the jurisdiction of the Federal Reserve and subject to a lower level of regulation. Furthermore, since euro dollars are not subject to the U.S. banking regulations, the higher level of risk to investors is reflected in higher interest rates. So the history. The euro dollar was derived from the fact that the initial dollar-denominated deposits were largely held in European banks. At first, these deposits were known as Eurobank dollars. However, US dollar-denominated deposits are now held in financial centers across the globe and are still referred to as euro dollars. Similarly, and also confusingly, the term euro currency is used to describe currency deposited in a bank that is not located in the home currency where the currency was issued. For example, Japanese yen deposited at a bank in Brazil would be defined as euro currency. After the conclusion of World War II, the quantity of U.S. dollar deposits held outside the United States experienced a substantial increase. Contributing factors include higher levels of imports to the United States and economic aid to Europe as a result of the Marshall Plan. So essentially, European socialism, this is what I was talking about with Stanley, is essentially largesse. A part of this euro dollar system that we do now. And that's why you can control what people do in Europe through our dollars. And Russia, learned that the hard way. Okay? We yoinked their dollars from them. We took away their bank assets. We froze their money. And that's why in China, they looked at that and they were like, whoa. Man, the U.S. can literally just do that? Well, and what did I read about the Athenians and the Delian League So why did I talk about Greece and all that? Well, you see how it's done now. Do I need ships to go around the world? No, not really. But I definitely do need people to cooperate with me. That's why you have NATO and all this stuff here. We control these people through our money system. Okay? And that's what we're going to go back and look at the dollar milkshake theory. So, back here. There is a domestic dollar market and there is an offshore dollar market called euro dollars. When we get into this case where asset prices fall and that margin account needs new collateral, there's no identity or institution outside the United States that has the authority or ability to inject new dollars into the system. That's what it needs. It doesn't need new euros, yen, yuan, reals. It needs dollars. Only the Fed can inject dollars, but the Fed doesn't have the authority to inject dollars into Brazil, Europe, or China. The problem now is that the global dollar debt, at a minimum, is $13 trillion. That's a huge amount of capital and demand for dollars outside the United States. When the economy slows down, not only is it tough for those economies to service those debts, it makes it impossible to pay off those loans when they come due. So the argument has been made that the Fed will just bail out the rest of the world. They will print however many dollars are needed to give the rest of the world via swap lines. Okay, swap lines. Here, we're getting closer here. The Fed is not a proactive agency, and that goes for all central banks. The Fed is a reactive agency. The reason the Fed is printing dollars is because there's a huge demand for it. What happened in March was a huge spike in the demand for dollars, so much so that everything that was priced in dollars got sold in order to get the dollars themselves. So March 2020. The Fed was responding to huge demand for dollars both from the US and the external community. That is why when the Fed extended swap lines to these other countries, it was to get these countries access to dollars they couldn't print themselves. First of all, I need to explain how a swap line works. When we extend swap lines to other countries, we are not just giving them dollars. These are not gifts, these are loans. As an example, we will give the ECB, the European Central Bank, $1 billion, and they will give us $1 billion worth of euros, a swap. And at some point down the road, those need to be swapped back. The reason we give them dollars is because corporation banks and individuals in those other countries have dollar financing needs. For dollar loans to conduct trade in dollars, or for whatever reason, it's part of this dollar-denominated debt dollar needs or euro-dollar market outside the United States. So where is the ECB getting their currency to swap for ours? They have to print it too. So it's not like we are printing and they are not. They have to print at the same rate as we do to get the swaps. So when we swap with the ECB hand out those dollars to banks, and those banks extend new loans to corporations. It's not paying off old loans, and it's increasing the problem of dollar debt. It's reinforcing, not negating, the demand for dollars. Until they actually deal with paying off all this dollar debt in the world, the problem still exists. If you're paying off an old loan with a new loan, you're extending the problem. So to your point, if this can be used as a weapon, they can absolutely be used as a weapon. In the same way the US cuts off the SWIFT system from Iran, Russia, and other currencies in times of discord or geopolitical turmoil. And this was written when? March 2020. This was a couple years before what Putin did, right? And, you know, Russia already knew this. China already knew this was a potential. But, you know, of course, they thought they could just keep going along with this little game here. But now it's broken. The game is broken. COVID broke it. And now they're doing what they're doing right now against us, right? And Trump also is another factor, right? Trump started doing tariffs and things. So I think everybody across the world saw the game as it was being played. They played along. And now this game is over. The game is over. So we are now entering a new phase of the war, okay? They can do the same thing with swap lines. They're not going to give you swap lines to somebody to bail out their economy if we have sanctions on them. I think we're going into this G2 world with China and their minions and the United States and their minions. Oh, well, that sounds familiar. Why did I read to you guys about the Peloponnesian League with Sparta and the Athenians with the Delian League? It's Sparta versus Athens all over again. If you want dollar financing, which everyone needs to operate on the global scale, then you have to play ball. That's it. So I think you guys have the clue here. You guys have the idea, and you guys can save this PDF. Very good. A very good time capsule of what people were thinking back then. Okay. So let me see if I can go and read something else for you. Anything else? Maybe I'll read some more here. I don't think I can read all this stuff, and we can continue some other time. So I can continue this. I just found this article, pretty interesting one. And it was written in the Reno Gazette. I'm like, what? Reno Gazette. Okay. And this is kind of, I think this, I haven't read this thing yet, but I think that based on the title, they're going to say something that I completely have thought about already. And this was written in 2019, but I was just going on Google typing in mercantilism and stuff. So I think the central banks are trying to do a new type of mercantilism. And when you read about that dollar milkshake theory, it kind of makes sense. We're weaponizing the dollar, right? In the same way that like the old European powers were creating colonies around the world and creating these trade companies like the East India Company or the South African Company or the Hudson Bay, right? Like England did the best out of all of them doing this type of stuff to suck out all the resources and gold and silver from all these colonies. The new mercantilism. Interest rates race to the bottom. Currencies depreciate. Robert Barron, 2019, August 2019. Okay. Mercantilism was a practice in Europe a couple centuries back. Okay, let me zoom in. That encouraged trade protectionism because the theory was that a positive trade balance generated wealth. The term beggar thy neighbor is a phrase often associated with the concept. During the recent period of world growth, where nearly every country's exports were rising, there was little incentive for governments to manipulate economic policies to foster even more economic growth. Getting back to normal seemed to be the universally adopted mantra, and that implied rising interest rates and tighter monetary policies. However, today, when the world trade is contracting, some of which may be due to trade wars, but much of which is due to softening worldwide economies, moves by central banks to stimulate their economies have a secondary impact: the reduction of their currency's value relative to the world's reserve currency. That reserve currency, of course, is the US dollar, and much of the world trade is so denominated. Trade advantage. When I see the path of interest rates and the explosion of negative yielding sovereign and now corporate debt, I can't help wondering if a form of mercantilism isn't creeping back into today's upside-down financial world. With a substantial portion of trade done in dollars, and with worldwide trade now in contraction, the wholesale lowering of interest rates by the world central banks weakens the currencies of those countries in dollar terms, giving them an advantage in terms of trade. While their primary goal may be spurring domestic demand, all the central bankers currently are aware of this secondary effect. The stampede. Despite the apparent confusion among the Federal Open Market Committee (FOMC) members, the rate-setting committee of the Fed, as to whether the July rate cut should have been 25 or 50 basis points, or none at all, according to two such members, as soon as the Fed cut, there was a stampede by other central bankers to follow suit. Early in August, markets were surprised by the rash of central bank rate cuts. So far in 2019, at least of this writing, 17 central banks have cut. Now you look at what happened the next year with COVID, right? Everyone had to go all the way back to QE. And then 2 years later, 2 to 3 years later, everybody's rising their interest rates because of inflation. Strong dollar tweets. That leads me to wonder, if the Fed had cut by 50 basis points, would those other central bankers have cut by more than they did? Highly likely, I think. While they lower rates for the stated purpose of domestic stimulus, it appears that a weaker currency is an unstated objective. That's definitely what China likes to do. They got to keep their yuan weak. From this analysis, it appears that there is a basis for the president's tweets complaining about the strength of the dollar. Potential return to mercantilism. Here is the Fed's upcoming dilemma. If the US and world economies continue to weaken, and the Fed delivers a policy response by further lowering its administered federal funds rate, will that set off a chain reaction where other central banks lower in response? If it does, then we have returned to the world of mercantilism. Worse, it will signal a race to the bottom, to zero or negative rates everywhere, perhaps even in the United States. The big worry is that a worldwide recession is on the horizon, and that the push towards easy money amplifies the movement towards the zero bound. The latest data is not encouraging. So this is all in 2019, right? Everybody was worried about some kind of recession, something happening. And then COVID out of nowhere came around the corner, and we went back to zero, and now we're back to normal rates. Seems like an easy reset button to push, huh? So, in a recent interview, Jeffrey Gundlach, the CEO of Double Line Capital, Jeffrey Gundlach, the bond king, right? Okay. Placed the odds of a recession in the next year at 75%. Damn. So even then, late 2019, they were thinking everything was going to go to shit. Recession models at the various regional Federal Reserve banks have shown heightened risks. Every company that has a recession model has noted high and rising recession probabilities. When the Fed lowers rates again, which given the above data seems inevitable, if the same pattern followed by the world's central bankers as the one that just occurred, interest rates will be pushed further down. How deeply negative some will go is anyone's guess. Worse, the mercantilism of weakening one's currency for trade advantage may likely become quite apparent, with attendant political ramifications. And actually, there are 2 papers talking about this fact that, central bankers have, in fact, done this. Okay. So you can look at these 2 articles yourself, written by the IMF. So this one was IMF working paper written, 2006. Financial versus monetary mercantilism, long-run view of large international reserves hoarding. Okay. The sizable hoarding of international reserves by several East Asian countries has been frequently attributed to a modern version of monetary mercantilism, hoarding international reserves in order to improve competitiveness. From a long-run perspective, manufacturing exporters in East Asia adopted financial mercantilism, subsidizing the cost of capital during decades of high growth. They switched to hoarding large international reserves when growth faltered, making it harder to disentangle the monetary mercantilism from a precautionary response to the heritage of past financial mercantilism. Monetary mercantilism also lowers the cost of hoarding through a short-term boost to external competitiveness, but may be also associated with negative externalities leading to competitive hoarding. All right, that abstract was long-winded as hell. Okay, so you can read this yourself if you want, but this white paper written in 2006 mirrors what we just read in that 2019 article. Okay, and let me read another one for you, so then you can read this yourself as well. And both of these papers are in the description, so nothing new here. Okay, let me get that article here. All right, here. Okay. So we're almost at 2 hours. So let me end it with this. IMF paper. This was written in 2023 January. Central banks as dollar lenders of last resort. Implications for regulation and reserve holdings. Okay. This abstract is kind of long-winded, so let me just go to the introduction here. Central banks around the world hold large balances of foreign currency reserves, with the US dollar accounting for the dominant share of these reserves at about 59% of the total. In the aggregate, foreign official accounts held $7.06 trillion of securities in March of 2022, with $4.06 trillion of this in the form of US Treasury securities, our bonds. This makes foreign reserve managers among the most important players in the Treasury market, a fact that is often argued to be a key determinant of the level of US interest rates. So, these guys who are using our dollars to manipulate their currencies also help us by lowering our interest rates. So as long as they keep buying our bonds, they keep a ceiling of how high our own interest rates are, how high our own government has to pay back their debts. So this acts as a ceiling, and the Fed is bumping their head on that ceiling. And then you have Trump coming in and also going to put another ceiling on top of the Fed. So I think there's a battle here. Okay, there's going to be a battle. And if there is something called the globalist versus whoever's, I guess when you make everything dollar denominated and you have all these central bankers in the West, the quote unquote free world, right? So you are the leader of the free world. What does that mean, being free? You're not free. You are basically under a democracy controlled by a financial player called the IMF, right? The World Bank. All these people work together to set interest rate policies in the Western world. And then you have these third world, second world operators, China, Brazil, India, Russia, outside of that system, essentially. And we're going to butt heads. And everything is due to the fact that everybody's trying to figure out how much US bonds they have, how they control their currency with respect to the dollar, and interest rates. All of this together. This is where the battle is being fought right now. What is the financial implications in the financial system? And then how does that affect your stocks? Right? All this together must be understood. The implications of these reserve balances for market outcomes were also dramatically highlighted in the COVID pandemic-induced dash for cash in March of 2020. I read that already for you guys with the dollar milkshake theory, right? When heavy foreign central bank selling of treasuries played a major role in the dislocation seen in that market. What explains the large appetite of global central banks for foreign currency reserves and for dollar reserves in particular? In this paper, we focus on one potential motive arising out of the fact that firms in many countries run a significant currency mismatch in their capital structures, borrowing heavily in dollars, even when they have largely domestic operating exposures. We argue that in the face of such mismatch, a central bank will have a natural incentive to stockpile dollars so that it can more effectively serve as a lender of last resort in a state of the world where the local economy and banking system are under stress and need to be bailed out. We then go on to explore the normative implications of this behavior, showing how the reserve accumulation decisions of individual central banks can be excessive relative to a global optimum, to the extent that they do not internalize the general equilibrium impact of their choices on the aggregate supply of safe dollar assets and on the dollar interest rate. We begin by presenting some simple empirical relationships to motivate our subsequent theoretical work. We document that in a panel of 53 countries, central bank holdings of dollar reserves relative to GDP are significantly correlated with the dollar-denominated bank borrowing of the non-financial corporate sector, again relative to GDP, controlling for a number of known covariates of reserve accumulation. The interpretation we have in mind is that the latter variable is a rough proxy for the currency mismatch of the corporate sector, which in turn drives the currency exposure of the banking system and ultimately the dollar lender of last resort motive in our theory. Okay, let me go back to corporate bonds now, okay, since they referred to it. So how does this affect the corporate sector and companies? Okay, so this will influence how companies will get their bonds because the interest rate will affect them as well. So let me go here and we'll close off with this article. Okay, this one I already read to you guys. So I think, oh man, this one's not it, huh? So anemic high yield bonds. Let me see. So I put the wrong link in that description, huh? Okay, blah blah blah. Okay, I put the wrong link. Put the wrong link for that one. So the article in number 9 in the description, you gotta change that. Okay, so you gotta change that to this one. I made a boo-boo, so it's supposed to be this one, and I'll read this. Okay, so anemic high yield bond 80 line. 80 line is accumulation, I think accumulation distribution line, I believe so. Let me see. Accumulation and distribution line. Let's see. Yeah, accumulation distribution line. Okay, that's what that means. Okay. So, if you look here, this was before the 2022 bear market, all right? And if you look here at the 80 line, people were selling off bonds all the way since August. And I think this corporate bond market, the people there in the bond market already knew what Jerome Powell was going to do. So when he pivoted, Jerome Powell said, like, whoops, inflation is not transitory. He said that sometime in November. So it looked like the corporate bond market was already peaked at August, September, and was already going down into October. So they already seemed to already know what he was going to say in this Thanksgiving. And yeah, you can go to FINRA, and I guess I could go there and draw my own chart here, because this is something you're not going to find on TradingView or whatever. You're going to have to make this own chart yourself with spreadsheets. So you're going to have to get the data yourself. So I'll probably do that sometime down the line this year. But this is a very nice indicator here. So this was written in June 10th, 2022. Okay, so this was well after what happened in 2021. After making an oversold low on May 19th, the S&P 500 had a pretty impressive rebound effort, which included 3 really strong breath days on May 2025 to 2027. Not 2027, May 25th to 27 in 2022, that got a lot of analysts talking about a breath thrust signal of various flavors. But the S&P 500 bonked at a resistance level that had been a prior support level at the March 2022 lows, and after several days, it has now fallen back away from that test of the resistance. Breath might have been really good looking for the NYSE, New York Stock Exchange stocks in late May, but it was pretty anemic looking for the stock market's fellow travelers, the high yield corporate bonds. So you got to look at those corporate bonds, and they can sniff it out. They can sniff out what maybe Jerome Powell is going to say and do. This week's chart features a daily advanced decline line. Oh, I guess it's advanced decline, not accumulation distribution. My bad, guys. For those bonds in AD data, which is published each day by FINRA. These bonds move a lot more like the stock market than like T-bonds. What makes them even more interesting is that they tend to be terribly sensitive to liquidity. Ooh, yes. We need whatever we can get to figure out what the liquidity is if we're going to think the stock market's going up. Both good and bad. And so they function like a canaries in the coal mine of Newcastle a couple of centuries ago. They tell us when the conditions are great for stocks, and more importantly, they tell us when liquidity is in short supply. The high yield bond 80 line did bounce higher along with the stock market in late May 2022, but it was a weak bounce and did not even make it to the 5% trend line. That is an exponential moving average with a 5% smoothing constant. So that's the EMA. So it's an average moving line that uses exponential. And McClellan, because they developed the EMA, they like using this 5%, 10%, 7% terminology. People don't use that anymore. Okay, this is really old school terminology, and maybe one of these days I'll go over it, because yeah, he links this article here. It was made by his mother and father way back when they used to do this by hand. The message is that while the bulls were able to mount a decent 3-day bounce, it was done without a real return of strong liquidity, which means that there was not the fuel for a real uptrend. Looking at this AD line longer term, we can see that it has shown us divergent top indicators at all of the major tops where we would have wanted to have that message. So you can look at the past, how this was pretty good at giving you the tops and bottoms here. Great financial crisis, and then end of QE3, right here, 2014, 2015. Then you had the market going sideways into 2016. Then you had this other one where the 2018 bake and shake. So yeah, I'm wondering if we got this kind of issue now going into the latter half of this year. So I'm probably going to have to manually make this line myself for you guys, and then you'll understand where things are going. It also told us when things were looking iffy at the end of QE1, QE2, that liquidity was not a problem, and the market pretty quickly got over its troubles. The end of QE3 was a different story, however, and saw a more significant decline in the high-yield bond AD line, indicating the liquidity problems that the financial system was suffering through then. So this was like the 2016, 2015 era. And then in early 2016, when the AD line shot higher to say that liquidity had somehow been restored. The AD line also told us about the liquidity problems 2018. That's where we're at now. We're looking for this. When the Fed decided it would do some quantitative tightening, or QT, shrinking its holdings of T-bonds and mortgage-backed securities, MBS. It showed no response when stock prices rallied in the summer of 2018, setting up the big decline in Q4 later that year. Okay. All right. So that's how it is. It also told us about the big liquidity problems we are now facing when it made a divergent top versus stock prices in late 2021. So now I gotta do my homework, put this in a spreadsheet, figure out where that 80 line is going. For now, what I've seen is that like the high yield bond market hasn't looked too bad, but maybe that's deceptive, and there's something really sneaky going on underneath. I mean, Trump just got inaugurated, only 1 week in. We haven't hit the trouble stuff yet. And in 2 years, I believe in May 2026, at that point, Trump could kick away Powell. So you got to wait 2 more years, essentially. I mean, 1 more year, my bad. And then, yeah, Trump can do something. I believe it's May 2026. If he wants to get rid of Powell, yeah, he can do that. So let me check if that's 2026 in May. Yeah, 2026. So next year, 1 year. We got 1 year, so he could do that. He could shake up the markets. If he kicks off Powell, off the chairman of Federal Reserve, then yeah, that could cause some issues. Market doesn't like unexpected stuff. So I don't know who he would put in there if he does that. So watch for May 2026. That might be the time when things hit the fan. Okay, guys? All right. So that was it. I covered a lot of stuff in 2 hours. I didn't get through everything I wanted to cover. I can save the rest for later. You can see that because I can cover Russia's opinions with that and go through the history of this. All right? Because you got to look at the history. We're back to where we started back when we have trade wars. Got 2018 stuff peaking up again with the reverse repo issues, liquidity being drained. Jerome Powell wants to fight Trump. All the same conditions as 2018. You got to look back there, and then you can figure out how you want to play this. But for now, yeah, you can go over this whole stream, and you can see how I'm talking about this. And then how does that relate to AI? Well, we'll see, because AI is the Joker card here, because they want to use AI as a productivity machine to get around inflation, right? And we also have the strong dollar. Our dollar is a lot stronger than it was in 2018. And that also can put a blunt on inflation. But again, everything is about economics, and a lot of these economists like to argue with each other. We already had a dissenting opinion on CNBC. I played that clip where that dude was like, oh, all you guys are wrong about inflation. Trump is not going to increase inflation because of this and this and this and that. Okay? So it could be all true. I don't think anybody agrees. If we look at Milton Friedman, it's like monetary phenomenon is what causes inflation. Yeah, I probably will go over that as a continuation of this stream. And this stream, again, is a continuation of my January 9th stream. Okay, Fed Trek 3, the search for liquidity. So that's all I'm doing here. Just going back and revisiting things and trying to explain it further for you guys, and we'll continue along. Now, tomorrow, let's see if NVIDIA crashes. That'll be good. Good time to trade. I'll probably show up in the morning if something interesting happens, see if I'm going to buy, just short something more. So, yes, I'll come back tomorrow, and we'll go back to our normal type of content there. But this was just a good sideshow, sidetrack. A detour, okay? Scenic route. All right, let's put it that way. Scenic route for economics. All right, guys. And remember to donate, like, and subscribe. Hit the Cash App, Portia J, PORSHAJAYE, Cash App. And if you want to hit the PayPal, PORSHA@jghb.info. Okay, and yes, right here, you can see that. And you can email me, because we have our own email now to do so. Crack, CRACK @jghb.info. If you have any questions, suggestions, anything you want to know about, I can cover that. And go on, contact me there. And yeah, hit the like and subscribe, of course. Yeah, of course. And we'll see ya.
Feel like I should, feel like I should, feel like I should, feel like I should go. Go. Feel like I should go. Feel like I should, feel like I should, feel like I should, feel like I should go. Feel like I should go. Feel like I should, feel like I should, feel like I should, feel like I should. Feel like I should go.